Welcome to the Sacramentalists, a podcast where the ancient Christian faith is brought to bear on issues prevalent in modern culture. We're your hosts, Father Hayden Butler,
Father Creighton McElveen,
and I'm Father Wesley Walker.
and today we're thrilled to have Father Joseph Francis and Allison Reimschussel on the show. Father Francis is the rector of St. Albans Church in Arlington, Texas. He's the diocesan liturgist for the Anglican Diocese of Fort Worth, and he is father director of the St. Michael's Southwest Conference, which most recently convened in June of this year. Allison is a photographer, a real estate specialist, and the illustrious head counselor of the St. Michael's Conference, overseeing many of the activities that define the conference experience. Allison and Father Francis, we're thrilled to have you both on the podcast. How are you both doing today?
Doing great.
Doing awesome. Just had lunch. Feel great.
Good. We're all ready to go then.
I have to make one observation about Father Francis. So listeners know Father Hayden and I hate ourselves, so we're Dallas Cowboys fans. And I met Father Francis because we were down in Dallas for a conference, and I attended his mass on a Sunday morning, the early mass before going to see a Cowboys game, which they did win. So I put that on you, Father. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anytime.
We need a little more of that, though.
We pray a lot for them. So
well, they need it.
All the other Dallas teams are doing great, though.
That is true. That is true. We just happen to pick the one that isn't.
It's a tragic romance, but someone's got to participate in it.
it's good for your growth in holiness.
There we go.
That's right. A prolonged season of desolation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, today we're here to talk about... Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, what's a win without a lose, right?
That's right. That's right. We've got to hold both with equanimity. So today we're here to talk about the St. Michael's Conference, which I had the privilege of participating in this last June, and I mentioned in a previous episode that we'd be talking about today. And we're really honored to have these two leaders of the conference, of the Southwest Conference, here with us to explain what the St. Michael's Conference is for those who have not been exposed to it or are not aware of it. And to see it and for its formative value in the life of Anglican Catholic youth. And so, I'd like to just jump right in here and ask both of you. The idea is that this is kind of a free-flowing conversation. But to ask you first, what is the St. Michael's Conference, and can you tell us briefly about the history of it?
yeah, so we're as far as I can tell, either the third or the fourth conference. We're also the youngest. The original one started on the East Coast. I believe they gather in Connecticut, and they just celebrated something like their 60th conference. Ours is only in our 18th year. So you have the original conference on the East Coast. You have Midwest, which gathers up in Michigan. They're a bit older than we are. And then we were planted back in, I believe, 2006. From what I can gather, the original conference started because there were a number of Catholic-minded clergy out that way, and they were looking at what was going on in the culture 60 years ago, and they thought, we better do something to equip our young people to deal with all the changes that are going on. And they need something that is substantial, that's much more like meat than it is milk. And they saw what was happening in their respective dioceses as far as youth ministry and formation of young people goes, and they found it lacking. So they said, well, let's just do something on our own. And they came up with this idea for a week-long conference of basically teenagers of all ages. Ours goes from 12 to 19. The other conferences, I think, might move it a little bit. I think the East Coast one might go through 21. But it's a week-long conference. We start on a Sunday evening and run through the following Saturday. And we gather in community for worship, education, fellowship, and recreation. And I'd like to run through the schedule, just kind of give you an outline, because that really gives a good sense of what's most important to the conference, is just to kind of look at the structure of the day. So we get the kids up at like 7 o'clock. At 7:30, we begin with morning prayer in the chapel. 8 o'clock is a solemn high mass, which is served by boy conferees. It's a solemn high mass every day, Monday through Saturday morning. So that takes about an hour. Then they have breakfast, and then there are 3 classes that they take, each an hour long. And depending on how many years they've been coming to the conference determines what classes they take. So if you're a first year, you get 2 required classes, a survey class and a mass class, and then you get to choose one. Second year, I think you get a Bible class and a moral theology class. And then your third year, you get a church history class, and then the rest are electives. And the electives are varied every year. Some of them are a little bit flashier than others. We've done a defense against the dark arts class in the past, dealing with, the demonic and like witchcraft and what do Christians think about these things. And that one's wildly popular among the kids. But they cover all manner of topics, the electives. And again, it just depends on what the clergy want to teach on each year. So that's the morning. They have lunch. And then the afternoon, there are kind of normal camp-y sort of activities, swimming, sports, arts and crafts. They also have the opportunity to serve in different ways in the afternoon. So they may help kind of clean up the camp. They can do choir practice. They can serve on altar guild. Later in the afternoon, we do a rehearsal for Solemn Evensong, which is at 4:30. Then we have that liturgy followed by a faculty talk. After that's dinner. And then my probably favorite part of the day, which is discussion groups after the evening meal, which is really where a lot of good work is done. The discussion groups change each day. So they get to choose which one they go to. Some of them are very lighthearted, such as like they might deal with aliens or communists or hot button questions like, can you poop in heaven? Things like that. Other ones are a little bit more serious and deal with current cultural issues. So of course we've hit really hard on homosexuality and transgenderism and abortion and things like that they're hearing people talk about, and they're not quite sure what they think about it or what the church has to say. So we allow them to discuss it, and the clergy sort of facilitate those discussions to make sure they kind of go in the right direction. But they do get to express their opinion in an environment where, they're away from their parents and they can talk openly, but also get an idea of what the church has to say. So that takes us into the evening. There's an evening activity, a mass practice for the following morning. So the boys serving at mass the next day spend about an hour rehearsing for it to make sure they're prepared and know what to do. And then we close out the day with Compline. So it really runs from about 7 a.m. to basically midnight. And then the faculty and counselors are kind of recouping in the evening after all of that. So it's an exhausting week, but it really is one of the best things we do. And as you've seen from the schedule, it's really focused on the rhythm of life that we try to enculturate as the church. It's focused on worship in the chapel, formation, and then of course just spending time eating with one another, enjoying each other's presence, playing games, doing whatever it may be. But it's a very intense schedule focused on the formation of them within the Catholic life in its various manifestations.
No, that was your comment that it's a robust week. It was I realized quickly what you like, that we were doing 18, 19-hour days, and it was all meaningful. It was all substantial stuff there. But it's that immersive experience that then kind of resets the imagination of what participating in the church looks like. I was watching kids at the beginning of the week kind of being like, wow, this is a lot. By the end of the week, they couldn't get enough of it. And it was really wonderful to see that kind of transition just by being a part of something that again was immersive. It surrounded them everywhere they went with that kind of deliberate flow through the day that was grounded in the rule of prayer there. Allison, can you comment on the kind of the mentorship behind all this that the counselors provide? Because that's as much a part of the week, I think, as the official programming or the in between times that I saw so often reflected in the ad hoc moments that counselors had with the conferees there. Could you comment a little bit about those in between spaces, the activities, the importance of the recreation throughout the day in between these really kind of sometimes really intense experiences that they might otherwise be having?
Well, all of my counselors, I pick them based on being role models in the faith. We have an award at the conference called like the quintessential, and it's somebody who really embodies that Michaelite spirit of dedication and like living out their faith, not just at the conference, but like in their daily life and every interaction. And so the people on the counselors are quintessentials. So they're models of excellence. And so they're people that you want your kids to be around to learn from them. And so and they're all very passionate about the conference. And they're all also ready for it, like they're spiritually ready for it. They've done a lot of their own spiritual work before coming there to be ready to focus on every conferee. So we do, like, I encourage the counselors to ask God to help them connect with a few of the conferees. So, and then really develop a relationship with them. So I would say like each counselor has a few people that they really connect with, not just during the conference, but then they keep it up after the conference too. So there's lots of one-on-one chats and guidance that we will give them. And we also do a lot of fun activities like scavenger hunts and talent shows. And I ask that the counselors be very involved in those activities, not just sitting on the sidelines, but actively participating with the conferees, not making us separate than them. Like that's kind of one of the things about the conference is we want to build up the conferees to not be treated like they're children, but to be treated like we're all together in this community. So that's a little bit about what it looks like. Every counselor that I have, they're on board. They're ready for it.
I think one of the unique things about the conference is our faculty, which are generally clergy, and then also the counselors. We purposefully choose people that not only live an exemplary Catholic life outside of the conference, but people that represent the different side of vocational opportunities that the kids have. So our counselors, they tend to be like college or post-college age people, but we always have at least one or two, both male and female counselors who are married or older or maybe even widowed, that kind of show what it looks like to live this life, not only when you're younger, but when you're in a different state. Same thing with the clergy. Some of us are married, some of us are single. We also, in recent years, have tried to have a representative of the religious life, either an oblate or tertiary, or in the last couple of years, we've been fortunate to have, we had Mother Miriam of the community of St. Mary, the superior of that order. She was here for 2 years. And then this past summer, we had Sister Mary Grace from the Benedictine Abbey in the Diocese of Quincy. And she's just recently made her full profession of orders, and she's younger than me and was awesome. Really, really great to be there. So within the dynamics of the conference, they see people that represent all these different vocations, and all of us are gathered to do the same thing. And I'm really intent that they see that, because how do we foster vocations to priesthood or religious life or marriage or singlehood? How do we do that unless they see people doing all those things well? We have generally about 10 to 12 faculty members. So they're hanging out with generally about 10 priests and one member of a religious order, basically all day for a whole week. And that alone leaves an impression on them. I remember my first conference, I was a conferee back in 2008, and my parents dropped me off not knowing really what it was. And my dad will still talk about how they showed up at Roloff's dining hall where we do check-in, and he sees like 8 priests walking down the hill. It's 100 degrees in Texas, and they're all wearing cassocks. And he's like, "This is where I want my kid to be. I mean, this is awesome. I don't know what it's going to be like, but it can't be too bad if this is who he's going to be with all week." So that's part of the unique dynamic of the conference, I think.
I have a quick
I'll
question.
also say,
Go ahead, Allison.
oh, I was just going to say that meant a whole lot to me too. I'm 30 years old and I have so many personal relationships with priests because of the conference, that I know where I can go for confession. I know where I can go for spiritual direction. I know where I can go for hard questions. Several that I could chat with. And a lot of my friends see that and they're like, "How do you know so many priests?" I'm like, the conference.
So I have a question for sort of the uninitiated who might be listening to this and think it sounds really cool. When you describe the schedule, Father, it sounds a lot like what people might think of as summer camp, but obviously that's not the word that you all use for it. You use conference, and I know Father Hayden and I have talked about this a little bit behind the scenes, that it's kind of a very intentional distinction. How would you make the delineation between conference and camp?
I think part of it would be recognizing that the central purpose of what we do is worship of our Lord Jesus Christ and formation in his character. Everything else is secondary to that. I mean, they spend probably at least 3 hours in the church each day. Everything else revolves around that. So it's not, I don't think it's so much that we're a conference and not a camp, but if you want to put it a different way, we're truly a church camp. We're not a camp with church stuff attached to it. We are a church camp, with that being the most important part. Everything else revolves around the daily rhythm of just basic Catholic Christianity. So maybe the word conference is helpful to avoid maybe some of the associations of a kind of traditional camp model, whether it's Christian or non.
I also think the word conference sounds very serious and kind of elevates them, because one thing, we don't ever call them kids, we call them conferees. And we want to show them respect, to kind of like elevate them up into making their own spiritual journey. Not their parents' faith, it's their faith with God. And the word conference sounds serious to go to that as a 12-year-old.
No, that seems right. It seems like conference is something you do when you're part of a profession. You know, you gather together and you're as a professed person with other professed persons, and that's what you're meeting around, is that common profession. And as Catholic Christians, that's exactly, what we're doing in that. So for maybe a follow-up question too that I would have with that is I've been around youth ministry for like 20 years, and oftentimes one of the false dichotomies of it is that you either have kind of you're saying like, oh, this is going to be like hard work and substance, or this is going to be fun, and fun and games. Those things get contrasted with each other a lot. Can both of you weigh in on how the St. Michael's Conference harmonizes those and kind of dispels that false dichotomy between something substantial and something enjoyable?
I think first, the schedule is something that intimidates a lot of people who are interested in the conference. So, I mean, it's prominent on our website. We really are kind of proud of it, and we want them to see what it's going to be like. So the structure and kind of rigor of the schedule, again, can be sort of intimidating. What I found is that a lot of our young people not only thrive under it, but actually secretly desire it. There are a lot of demands put on their time in, the secular world, of course, but so many of our young people feel like they're just kind of pushed around, that they live kind of chaotic lives. And part of that may be, difficult family life, unhealthy friendships, unhealthy dynamics at school and in other places. And so when they're brought into a context where they're taken away from their phone, for one, and have no outside distractions, but are simply immersed within an authentic Christian community that is structured in a way that is for their benefit, they not only thrive, they enjoy it, and they realize they've been craving it. I can't tell you how many of these conferees that come in on day 1 or day 2, and you think this kid's not going to come around, and by day 3 or day 4, he or she comes to you and says, like, this is doing stuff I never expected it to do. And it's often the conferees that seem to be disinterested or are very quiet or refuse to participate. They're the ones that often come back year by year by year, because they find there something substantial, something that they don't have in their daily life, but they desperately want, even if they don't really know it. So I think with that being our perspective, the schedule actually becomes a way of like freeing ourselves up to simply be with one another. So even though there's a lot going on, those moments tend to become enjoyable. They enjoy just sitting quietly in the church waiting for the liturgy to begin. They enjoy lining up before we go into meal times. They enjoy, of course, the normal sort of camp games and activities as well. So because there is a balance there, we don't try to overburden them. But I think they see the good in all of these things together. They may have favorite moments and not so favorite moments, but it seems like they understand it to be this cohesive way of life that secretly they want, and usually by the end of the week they admit that.
That's good. Along those lines, it reminds me of those really memorable opening lines, and I believe that you gave in your initial address when at the opening ceremonies. If I'm remembering them correctly, it's "You are not here to have fun, though you might. You're not here to make friends, though you might, and you're not here to fall in love, though you might." Am I remembering those correctly?
Yes, and I'll take no credit for them. So the opening talk, which includes those lines, which every conferee knows by heart, those words come from Father Christopher Cantrell, who was the founding director of the conference, who passed away earlier this year, which was a terrible loss to all of us. So offer a prayer for him, if you would, in his repose. But he, I believe, stole them from Father Jeremiel in the Midwest Conference, who I'm assuming probably stole them from someone else. So they're part of the long-standing tradition of the conference. I'll say that while I agree with him, and I loved hearing those words every year as a conferee, and I cherish saying them now, I might alter the last one. So we say, you're not here to have fun, but you might. You're not here to make friends, but you might. You're not here to fall in love, but you might. I want to change the last one because, one, we've had conferees that have married each other at this point. And part of our purpose, in some sense, might very well be to cultivate those kinds of relationships. But it's also true that they are there to fall in love, but not so much with each other as it is to fall in love with Jesus. Everything, if we've done anything right in the week, it is to help them see what it looks like to love Jesus and to learn to love him themselves. So while all that's true, the last one, I always want to put an asterisk next to it.
No, I mean, our good friend of the podcast, Father Jordan Gettings, down in Houston, is an example of that, of falling in love, and also our good friend Katie West, one of the counselors there as well, who listens to the podcast as well. Congratulations to all of them for successfully falling in love at the Michaelite Conference. Allison, what have those words meant to you over the years, and kind of how did you approach them initially, and how have they come to kind of bear an importance in your life?
Well, they kind of make me tear up now because Father Cantrell has passed away. They've meant a lot to me. One thing is, joyful experiences are great, but they're always secondary because all of these things in life are fleeting. So it just always served as a reminder, like the primary reason why I'm on this earth. The primary goal at the conference was my spiritual development and my love for the Lord. And I noticed in my 20s that you just can't hang on to anything because everything will disappoint you, even if you think that it won't. So that's what it's meant to me.
Allison also does a very good job of making sure all those things actually do happen, though. So I'm the one that reminds them they're not there for this, but Allison's the one that makes sure that they do have fun, they do make friends, and they do fall in love. And she does a wonderful job of that. So we kind of balance each other out in that way.
We definitely do. I didn't even think I wanted to be the head counselor because I was like, no, I'm not your decision maker. I'm not your leader. I'm going to be the one that wants to have a basketball tournament during the afternoon activity. So, and those are true things. I'm great at that. I'm good at one-on-one conversations, but I'm super thankful to be the head counselor. It wasn't something I thought I'd be good at, and maybe I'm still learning it, but it's grown me and matured me so much to be in this position.
That's something I'd like to focus in on for a moment, if we might, which is the evident synergy between, especially you and Father Francis, which is it's something that's unique among the different conferences and camps I've participated in, which is that you had two people leading two different group of people that had to be integrally connected in their work together. There was a wonderful harmony between the counselors and the clergy and other faculty. I'm wondering if both of you could kind of comment on how that gets established and how that gets maintained, of whether there's been challenges to that, and kind of how you both as a director and head counselor, how your work together, sets the tone and pace for, these two groups of people to work together. Because it's often the case that you have one or the other. You have like counselors leading it that are trying to do like spiritual direction and a bunch of like really deep technical like spiritual life work, or you have, faculty people who are essentially faculty being, called into the task of like leading a basketball tournament, which they may not be sort of drawn to or gifted at. How do you keep this group together, and how has that developed over the years in your experience of it?
I think to start, we've inherited a 60-year tradition of how to do this, and our conference was in its 18th year, and I know Father Cantrell in the beginning kind of crafted it and learned from his own mistakes, and so I'm the beneficiary of a lot of that wisdom. And I think one of the great things about being a Catholic Christian is that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You simply receive what's been given to you. That's true on a theological level, and it's also true on a practical level. So I think a lot of that is just this works, and so we continue to build on that, what we've received. The other thing is we have become increasingly very particular about who we invite to serve as members of the faculty and as counselors. Those who can be conferees, anybody. You don't have to be from the Anglican tradition. You don't even have to be baptized. Anybody that's interested and willing to participate, we want to be there. And in fact, I'm trying to not set a cap on how many conferees we'll allow. We had our largest conference this year. I think ended up with like 89. And Allison and I have always wanted 100 kids, 100 conferees, but I don't know that we can do it. It was a lot. So anybody can serve as a conferee, but for counselors and faculty members, we're really very particular about who they are and what kind of life they're leading, because we've realized that it's important for them to have their own houses in order if they're going to kind of present this way of life to the conferees. They have to be going to Mass every week. They need to be making their confession. They need to be engaged with their parish. It can't be like, oh yeah, I know I need to do that, and hopefully I will next year. We're very intentional that these are people who are actively leading the life we want the conferees to live. And Allison, I think, does a really good job of bringing in counselors who do that. And we're also really fortunate to have counselors that are really cohesive right now. They love the conference. They go back to their parishes and instantly jump on the parents again about next year. And that's not something we've always had. We've had a lot of counselor turnover some years, But in the last couple of years, I think God has just like immeasurably blessed us with these wonderful counselors and faculty members who are just desiring to live the Catholic life, and they want to see it happening among younger people, and they're willing to sacrifice a week away from their families and their parishes, and maybe some of them even take a week of vacation and spend it in Granbury, Texas, where it's 100 degrees and hot all the time. So
yeah, I take a lot of, I try to be very discerning and intentional, and I let the person I'm trying to be intentional with know that. So I will have interviews with people and make it very serious, because that's when I became a counselor, I was interviewed to be one, and made it more serious. I don't just pick somebody if their weekend is open, their week is open, you know. Very thoughtful about it. And then I try to consider, for synergy purposes, try to consider people with different giftings. Some people on the team are really theologically knowledgeable. They love the liturgy and they know the history and they want to talk about it and they want to bring that to the group. Some are one-on-one connectors. They're super energized and fun. There's some that are really logistical and organized, and they need me to have all the rules, which I'm not always great at. So I'm thankful for them. And then you've got more of the nurturing type of people, like the mothers of the group, right? So I've got people with different giftings. And then what I do is, my job is, I love to encourage them in those giftings. And that if I can fill them up and like encourage them in what they're doing, then they'll have this overflow to do that for the conferees. So it's one of my goals, is encouraging them and building them up in their spiritual gifts.
No, that's wonderful.
So
Also, the synergy between Father Francis and I, we've known each other since we were 12 years old.
Lots of practice then.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the questions I have for you guys is, oftentimes when you work in sort of youth ministry, you work with young people, it can sort of become like a niche for those young people, and they're not super integrated in their own parish life and their church. And I was curious about how the St. Michael's Conference helps integrate, as people kind of immerse and saturate and soak in the Catholic life, how that then integrates into the rest of their participation outside of the conference, sort of in their daily parish experience.
This is one of my favorite parts. And we end the week, the Father Director, I give a closing talk, which again, I didn't come up with it. I inherited it, and it's great. Father Cantrell would always end by reminding them that what they experience at the conference is not meant to be anything extraordinary. It's simply what they should be experiencing in their parish churches. And we know that that's not always the case. We have conferees that come from various jurisdictions, various churchmanships, and every parish is different. I understand that. But we send them off saying, what you experience here is what we want you to help reinforce or create or contribute to in your own parish. It's not meant to look or feel different from what you do every week. The conference is not just supposed to be a 1 out of 52 weeks in a year sort of thing. I think we've done a really good job of sending them back to their home parishes energized and encouraged, and maybe even a little bit emboldened to go to their priest and say, Father, when are your confession times? Why don't you have confession times? Have you made your confession? They go back positive and energized and wanting to do this. And I've always seen it as a way of building up the parish rather than kind of pushing against that. And I think sometimes youth ministries can be guilty of that, that the things they offer don't feel like what they experience in their home parish. It becomes a niche. It's, well, we do that at camp, but we don't do that here. They feel like two different worlds. And we try to create the best, the most beautiful world, the fullest expression of everything. We don't take any shortcuts, certainly not liturgically, not when it comes to fellowship, not when it comes to recreation, not when it comes to formation. We give them the biggest, the best, the most we can of all of these things. And I think they see that, they recognize that, and they take it back and they want to contribute those things in their parish. So I've always gotten really good response from priests who send their young people to the conference, because they say, this person came back and they were changed, and they're changed in a way that I think will help my parish. And a lot of the conferees who have grown up and out of the conference, they're involved as lay people or as clergy in their respective parishes, wherever they may be. At least for me, I've seen the fruit of it, and I'd be wrong not to mention that we've had quite a few vocations come out of this, not only to priesthood, but also to married life and other forms of life that have been discerned within the conference or aided by the conference. I don't know that I would be a priest if it were not for the formation and the love and community I experienced within this particular thing. I think we've seen the fruit and continue to see that fruit. So.
We also give them very practical ways to be involved. We have an altar guild, choir. You could be an acolyte. You could be a reader, greet, do oblations. So they're given ways that they can naturally extend into their parishes.
And we're traditionalists, so we do this along gender lines. So all the boys serve as acolytes throughout the week. Many of them have never served at a liturgy, so we train them, depending on how old they are and their experience level. But all of them serve. All the boys throughout the week serve, and then the girls serve, as Allison mentioned, as readers, and they can serve in altar guild. They can serve in choir in various ways to assist in the liturgy. So we're kind of training them to do stuff that we hope they'll do in their parishes, and a lot of it is very practical. Yeah.
I love that. One of the things that I've always been sort of convinced of is that young people respond well to responsibility and expectations. Like, this is what you can have. This is the fullest, most beautiful thing available, and then they go for it, and then they bring that energy to realize it. So coming back into the parish and bringing that energy with them, I mean, that's the ideal, right? I want my parishioners to come say, like, Father, I need to make a confession. Let's get this going. Like, that's the kind of stuff every priest wants. Really, they should.
It's also worth noting that as the conference has matured, we also offer kind of a truncated version for adults called St. Gabriel's Conference. And Father Timothy Matkin, the rector of St. Francis in Dallas, is the director of that conference. Allison also, she's a crossover, so she's also involved in running that conference, which is the first weekend in February. It's a Thursday through a Sunday morning, so you only have to take off Friday to go. You go out Thursday night. But adults, parents, and clergy have been so excited by what they see their young people doing at St. Michael's Conference that they've come back and said, well, I want to go. Why can't I do something kind of like this? And so I'm very thankful that Father Matkin has basically invented this adult version, and they've been doing it for a number of years now. So I think that speaks to the effectiveness of what's going on. Other people are wanting to do it. So we have St. Michael's Conference for 12 to 19-year-olds and St. Gabriel's Conference for 20-year-old and above.
I also want to mention something about St. Michael, our patron. The Western faith is presented so weak and soft sometimes, and St. Michael is he's fighting evil. And I think what we relay to the conferees is the Christian life is adventurous, it's dangerous, it's challenging, and it's fun. It's not weak or soft. So want to mention that too.
That reminds me of, we really push confessions throughout the week, and this, of course, is tied to our patronage, St. Michael. We want the conferees to leave better and with cleaner souls than when they arrive. So we start talking about confession on Monday at lunch, and confessions are offered every day. And if you're a first-year conferee, you receive pretty extensive formation in it on a practical level, how to prepare, how to make your confession, how to do the examination of conscience, and just what it looks like, and then talk about the common misconceptions. But we generally have about an 80% success rate for the conferees, and all of the faculty and all of the counselors are expected, and I would say required, to have made their confession either recently or at the conference. So everybody hopefully leaves with all of the baggage they've accumulated cleaned out before they go home. And one of the things we've noticed, going back to our patron, St. Michael, is that the Lord really works on us during the week. It is fun. It's really great. It's the best thing that I do in my ministry. But there's some real spiritual warfare that happens out there, because our young people are dealing with all kinds of stuff. Things that even I feel like were not going on when I was their age. Things are different and interesting, not always in the best way. And so they come in with all kinds of spiritual, emotional, and relational baggage. And it's not like we're trying to make these things come forward, but I think the Lord and His angels really are doing some significant spiritual warfare out there, and we see that, and we assist with it, and I think we see the fruit of it.
They need a significant space to work through the morality of this time, and that's another thing about the counselors, is they're very accessible, and they have all kinds of experiences to encourage them in going to confession, because that's a very scary thing for a 12-year-old. Just to give. I love to just tell the story of my confessions at St. Michael's conference, and how that it changed my life. To be just told, like, hey, here's my sin, but I forgive you. You are forgiven. You are good. That changed my life. I needed that, and they need that.
If I could touch briefly on the, and to kind of bring us around full circle to the tradition of this, one of the things that struck me was the wide age range of conferees, which is, again, unusual for youth ministry, which is usually like divided up between what we might call like middle school age and high school age, and they're both together. They have, I know that they have counselors appointed to different kind of substrata of those groups, but it was remarkable to see how the older students, especially if they'd been there a few years, were actively leading the younger. And it seems like, in terms of tradition, right, we're inheriting things that we're not reinventing the wheel, where we're inheriting things that have come before us. Can you speak briefly about the value of that as you've seen it on allowing space for older kids to actually be responsible for having those kind of, even conferee to conferee, leading others in worship and in any other part of the conference?
The returning conferees are so good. I'm so thankful for them. And at least in the past couple of years, we've always had a large number of first-year conferees, generally half, if not a couple more. I'm very thankful for that, but it does mean that there's a big kind of learning curve for most of the community in the first couple of days. And so those returning conferees, especially the ones who've come for 3, 4, 5, 6 years, this is where they want to be. They're excited to be there, and they know that all of the first years can and should and will get on board with this. And they like to see that transformation. So in the first day or so, when we're, the liturgy's kind of rusty and things are kind of awkward and we're just kind of getting the ball rolling, they do a wonderful job of taking some of the younger conferees under their wings, making sure they're comfortable, making sure, that they know where things are in the book. making sure they know where to go. They do a fantastic job. And I'll say, as a conferee myself, as a young person, I looked up to some of those people, and they were really formative for me. I admired them. And I look forward to kind of being formed by them each year, just like I did from the counselors or the faculty members. So that's a really, really important thing. I could say just one thing about the first year conferees. We've had a little bit of a shift. In the past, we've mainly pulled from the Diocese of Fort Worth, and there was a time when we had many from the Diocese of Dallas. Things have kind of changed with the realignment. But we now have people from the Reformed Episcopal Church. We have a couple of people from the Continuum. We have people coming from other dioceses around the ACNA and other jurisdictions. So this year we had people from California, Illinois, all around Texas, Georgia, New York, and everywhere in between.
We also have Roman Catholics and Orthodox too.
Yep, we've tended to have people that come from the other Catholic traditions as well, which speaks to the effectiveness of what we're doing. We kind of have a pan-Catholicism here. Of course, all of our clergy come from the Anglican tradition, but parents see the value in what we have to offer for their young people, even if they're in the Roman Church or from an Orthodox jurisdiction. But the age group, the age dynamics, I never really thought of when I was a conferee. It just kind of felt fine. I don't know if that's just kind of God blessing us with making things work, but on paper it does seem kind of odd, but it never seems to be a problem. The older conferees tend to take the younger ones under their wing, and it's beneficial to not have just 50 12-year-olds or 50 19-year-olds. They help each other. And again, our goal is to have them glimpse the full breadth of the Catholic life, from every age group, from every state, every vocation. We want them to see that. And so the significant age difference, I think, actually is a strength rather than a weakness.
I mean, where else can you, like, I'm trying to think of any other, area of a young person's life, especially in the formative years of adolescence, where they could have a continuous community for 7 years. That isn't divided up, or they have to end their participation in it after a couple of years or 4 years. It's really rare to find something with that kind of longevity, and that would speak to its formative its formative potential, because you could have so many years in a row if you went through it from the earliest to the latest, and then not to say of St. Gabriel after that, but it's rare, really rare to find continuous community anymore that isn't divvied up into microscopic niches or demographics.
Well, we have conferees that are going into their 7th grade year, and conferees that have completed their first year of college. So that's a big difference. I mean, a lot of maturing happens in between those two states of life. But again, I think that they influence and help each other, and we're all united to the one head, and he really is the one controlling everything and making things come together. I wanted to mention too that part of the idea of the conference, at least for myself, is to multiply. I don't just want to grow, I want to multiply. So we inherited things from Midwest. They inherited things from the East Coast Conference. And the goal for a long time has hopefully been to plant another conference, maybe on the West Coast or somewhere out that direction. And there's some initial talks about trying to do that. So what we've created, I don't just want to plateau and keep things going. I want to see us multiply and replicate. And if I get too many conferees, then maybe we'll have 2 weeks a year. I don't know how I could do that. My wife might kill me, but we will do whatever it takes to spread what God is doing to as many people as we possibly can, because the church desperately needs it, and it works. That's why we do it. It works.
Well, this is remarkable stuff. And sadly, we have to bring our conversation toward its conclusion now. But by way of that, it's a tradition on our podcast here that we...
Father, before we do that, we might want to give them an opportunity. If people do want to learn more or sign up, where can they do that?
Yeah, so Father Francis, could you please let us know, let our listeners know if they're interested in looking into more information or registering for next year's conference? How might they go about doing that?
Sure. We have a Facebook account, St. Michael's Conference Southwest, and then our website is stmichaelsw.org. stmichaelsw.org. Of course, if you just Google search St. Michael's Conference Southwest, you can find it that way too. And our 2025 conference begins on Father's Day, which in next year, I believe, is June 15th through the 21st. And that's in Granbury, Texas.
Very good. Thank you. So we like to conclude our episodes by going around the table once and just sharing something we're into lately, a book we're reading, a hobby we've been entertaining, or a life event that's been we've been immersed in, and we just kind of like to kind of bring it home on a personal note. And so, Father Francis, if we could start with you, what's something you've been into lately?
2024 has involved two new passions of mine. The first one is I discovered the author Michael O'Brien. He's a Canadian Catholic and a novelist. And I have 3 children and 1 on the way, so my reading time has really reduced. But I've read, I think, 7 of his books this year, and they're really great. They're kind of apocalyptic in an interesting way, but I found them fascinating. So my pitch for Michael O'Brien's books. And then the second thing that I've really been into in 2024 is kimchi. I discovered it and have really gotten into the science of making it. And I now have the big stainless steel, like massive swimming, like kids swimming pool size bowls to make large batches of kimchi. And it's liturgical and theological and just wonderfully rich. And I'm super into Korean food right now. So kimchi and Michael O'Brien, those are my things.
I desperately want you to write a book on the theology of kimchi.
Surely it exists, right? I mean,
it needs to.
I'll do my best.
We just had one of those like hot pot restaurants open up down the street, and it's too good. And they have a whole kimchi bar that's like, it's impressive.
It's
whole world
mystical.
Allison, what are some things you've been into lately?
Well, I've never been known to cook, and I'm just tired of that being my identity. So I got the Meal Prep Pro app, and I've been meal prepping. And I also did notice how much I do spend at restaurants, and it is absurd. So I've been meal prepping all 15 meals for the week, and I'll do that on a Sunday or Monday. And my grocery bill has been about $40 to $70, and I get all my meals completed, and I'm learning how to cook. So that's a big thing. The second thing is I have been praying the rosary a lot this year, which is different for me. Every Tuesday morning, my boyfriend and I'll meet with him. He lives around this lake, and we'll walk to the coffee shop together, do a rosary, pray a rosary rather, and then we'll have a coffee and read a book together. Like he'll do one chapter or one paragraph, I'll do the next. It's been really, really sweet. We do that every Tuesday.
That's wonderful.
Thank you.
What a great balance of like lifelong habits right there. Like, yeah, they could continue forever.
That's exactly. Doing a lot of growth work this year.
That's great. Father Creighton, what are you into lately?
Well, I feel that I have a 6-month-old, and so it's compulsory that I say, he's taking up all of my time, which is true. And he's amazing, and I love having a little baby boy. But I have been trying to read. One of the things that I knew would, like Father Francis said, your time to read sort of diminishes. But I have been trying to read more frequently. And one of I kind of typically throughout the year, I try to read something like 12 to 15 novels, kind of one a month. And then I'm constantly sort of reading through like at least one theology book a month. That just kind of is my homeostasis at this point. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. But as this month just started, one of the books that I was sort of super excited to get, Catholic University of America does the Thomistic Ressourcement series. There's 20-something books in the series, and a lot of them overlap and dovetail with things that I've spent a lot of my academic career working on. And so there's one by Father Dylan Schrader called Thomistic Christocentrism. And it looks at the Carmelite tradition in Salamanca as it relates to the incarnation, and sort of the position that the school in Salamanca takes, looking at Aquinas's position on the incarnation and sort of God's providence. Did Christ need to become incarnate? Aquinas says that, you know, he has a particular position, and it's sort of only centered around redemption, that's the reason for the incarnation. Scotus is kind of on the other end of the spectrum, that God intended Christ first to be incarnate. And the Salamanca school kind of takes a different tack. It kind of settles somewhere between the two, and it has an interesting place in the conversation. And he looks at some modern authors, one of which I've done a lot of work with, which is Hans Urs von Balthasar, and kind of, I think in some ways rightly, but maybe a little harsh, judges his position as wanting. But it's been a really good read, and it's been the sort of thing I needed. So when I can catch, you know, a chapter or half a chapter when Graham is napping, it's been the thing that's kind of kept me sane.
Father Wes, what are you into lately?
Well, also a book. I think I've even said this book before, but we've been doing the podcast so long now that things are repeating themselves. But Redwall, the novel Redwall. My oldest son is 6, and we read every night before bed, and so we decided to give Redwall a try, and he's loving it, and I'm loving revisiting it again. Such good books. And so I'm hoping we'll be able to make a big dent in the whole series over the next few years, because they're just such wonderful books. So there's that. And then I think the other big thing that's been taking up a lot of my time lately has been French. I've been trying to learn theological French. And so that's been a lot of fun. It's in some ways been much nicer than Latin. You know, you don't have to worry so much about declining nouns and things. So that's pretty encouraging. But yeah, so pray for me as I am learning a new language.
Father Wes, if you want to talk about it, let me know.
Commiserate, yes.
It's better than theological German, though.
Well, that's next on the to-do list. So, yeah. Father Hayden, what are you into these days?
Nothing so bookish in the last season. I'm, you know, my summer garden is kind of, it's coming to fruition here. So I've been harvesting summer squash from the garden and a lot of tomatoes. My tomato plants really were just off the hook this year, and so been harvesting those, making all kinds of things with those, and then also getting into the kind of the nuts and bolts of canning effectively and storing, and so because that's kind of an unexplored culinary niche for me, and it's my wife has a limited tolerance for my fermentation experiments, and so I have some extra time on my hands.
Kimchi's next.
Allowed one
Kimchi's next.
jar in the fridge at a time, so it's yeah. I would love to follow your footsteps, Father Francis, in the kimchi direction. I have to lay some persuasive groundwork before we get to that, because my work in lacto fermentation a few years ago during the pandemic, left us with some indelible marks in our fridge, and we've not quite recovered from that. So yeah, the summer garden is going well, and everything I need to. I'm kind of looking out the window now. Everything needs to get a good kind of pruning right now before we enter into the autumn months here. So. But yeah, that's been most of my time is spending out and getting my hands in the dirt, and it's been a stabilizing kind of few weeks of that. So, well, Allison and Father Francis, thank you so much for joining us here today. We're really grateful for you to take the time, and we're really honored by your presence. Thank you for your really good work with the St. Michael's Conference. I speak for all three of us when I say we're really enthusiastic about it, and we're cheering you on in all of it. And may it have many successful and fruitful years ahead.
Could we offer a St. Michael prayer before we close it out? Would that be okay?
I would love that. Let me just kind of bring us to a conclusion here, and then I'd love for you to close with that as our parting note here. Listeners, before we pray our way out, would you please consider following us on Facebook and Twitter, like and subscribe on YouTube, and leave us a rating and review on iTunes. And please, as always, consider joining our communion of Patreon saints for just $5 a month. And Father Francis, if you would close us with the St. Michael's prayer.
Yeah, let us pray. Saint Michael the Archangel, defend us in the day of battle. Be our safeguard against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. And do thou, O Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, thrust down to hell Satan and all wicked spirits who wander through the world for the ruin of souls. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. Amen.
Amen.
Amen.